And now I'm delighted to welcome the first black female mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. After her historical election last year, Mayor Lightfoot has made expanding opportunity and inclusive economic growth a major focus of her administration. Recently, she's been attempting to keep micro businesses afloat during the COVID crisis with the Recovery Grant Program. Mayor Lightfoot, it's really great to see you again. I always enjoy our discussions. You know, I went back to see some of the comments that you made before the COVID crisis struck, and I was struck that in February, you said, you know, I want to teach people how to fish. I don't want to just give them grants. I want to kind of implant in, you know, folks the resources and opportunity. And then somebody came along. Well, I won't say somebody, but you know, a pandemic hit and basically poisoned the water somewhat. So I'm interested in what your North Star is and how you've been approaching poverty eradication, but also creating these micro businesses under an unbelievably horrific, stressful time.
Look, my North Star hasn't varied one bit. It's still around equity and inclusion and recognizing how important micro businesses are to the economic health and well-being of our city. When you think about micro businesses, those businesses that employ 4 people or less, they are throughout every neighborhood in an urban environment. And sometimes those micro businesses grow and become small businesses and medium-sized businesses. So we know that the vital connective role that they play in neighborhoods, which is why even in this challenging time, we put $5 million out there for our micro businesses in grants to really help them be able to maintain their businesses, keep their employees active and engaged. But beyond that, we set up a $100 million small business grant fund, again, focused on small and micro businesses, and particularly those that weren't able to take advantage of the federal dollars that flowed over the course of the last 6 months, that being the unbanked. Small businesses or micro businesses that don't have an extensive banking relationship with a bank so that they could take advantage of the PPP loans. Also, businesses led by undocumented immigrants. Those entrepreneurs were not able to take care of any federal resources. So we filled an important niche for our small businesses. In addition to that, our business administration department has really reached out not only to host weekly seminars on everything about from writing a business plan to becoming a digital business, but also making sure that any changes to regulations that affected small businesses during the time of COVID, that they were read into and that they had the opportunity to ask questions about. So really how-to webinars. But we have really spent a lot of time and focus on supporting our small business community across Chicago.
Well, Mayor Lightfoot, you know, I know where Chicago is, and I was looking on Aman Bhutani's map, you know, when he had a big map there of the micro businesses and where they were dense. And so in the Chicago area, it's very dark there. So there are a lot of micro businesses in Chicago. But my question to you is, you have an Invest Southwest plan. Are there enough in the south and west parts of greater Chicago and Chicago? And what can be done if it isn't dense enough there? What can you do? What can others do to help create greater density in other parts of the city?
Well, they're not enough, but we are working on it. We've changed a lot of the ways in which we have offered financial supports to small businesses. One of the things that I heard over the course of my campaign, and certainly early on in our administration, is that there were a lot of programs that were intended for small businesses, but they couldn't take advantage of, either because there was a very high threshold for matching funds. And look, you know this, if you're a small business, one of the biggest challenges, as Mr. Bhutani said, is access to capital. So giving people a matching grant that they'll never actually be able to take advantage of is really no help at all. So we changed a lot of those matching grants to peer grant programs. But the other thing that we heard is around technical assistance, both in applying for funds, but also on the back end to make sure the businesses were really fully able to take advantage of those programs. So we've made sure that our small business centers are really focused on providing technical support at the application stage and throughout, and if they're successful, because we know that's necessary to really provide additional support to small businesses.
Now, I know your city has been under stress a lot lately, and I think one of these things is, we don't always control the images that are out there. A lot of people focus on violence or people in protests in streets. But there's another side, at least what I think we're talking about today, which is positive. It's growth. You see people building businesses under times of stress. And I'm just interested in what you think the city and you yourself can do to help to get greater opportunities for show and tell of some of these powerful stories of people meeting the challenge right now.
Well, that's a great question, and you're 100% right. I think we have to be better at telling our own story and claiming our own narrative and not letting it be defined by others who don't have our best interests at heart. We've been reaching out and doing that a lot internally, but we need to now, as we start to slowly recover from COVID-19, tell that story on a national and international stage. And that's why I welcome opportunities to participate in programs like this. I feel that one of my key responsibilities as mayor is to be the advocate in chief for our city, for our residents, and particularly for our small businesses. And you're 100% right. People who have no business to hope because they're coming out of very dire circumstances are enthusiastic and energized to be part of this vibrant small business community here in Chicago. Whether it's a woman who owns Justice of the Pies, who created a baking business and has been incredibly agile in adapting to the new normal of COVID-19. Whether it's our small businesses that offer food services, whether it's professional services, digital businesses, there's a whole range of great stories that are out there, and particularly stories of courage and resilience in the face of COVID-19. And we want to uplift those stories as much as we possibly can.
Mayor Lightfoot, I know this may go into personal territory, but I'm always interested. I mean, you came in right away when you were mayor, and you said we need to change this. We need to end poverty. We need to come in and look at it, but not as just a grant program. We need to look at. I mean, I'm just interested in what you draw from in terms of your own experience of being on the line. What experiences help make you the mayor you are in dealing with the economic stress that your citizens are feeling?
Well, I never forget my own circumstances growing up where we were a family that lived paycheck to paycheck and the stress that brought and the challenges. But the other thing that I do, even in a time of COVID, is I make sure that I'm out in neighborhoods and I'm talking to residents. And I'll give you one example. Unfortunately, like many cities across the country, we faced terrible looting and violence on the last weekend of May. June 1st, which was a Monday, I went out all across our city to make sure that I was understanding the damage firsthand and looking at what we needed to do to give businesses and neighborhoods the supports that they needed to recover and get on the other side of this terrible series of events. I met so many small businesses that were devastated by the looting. And it was at a time when we were thinking about whether or not we should reopen our economy ever so slightly coming out of COVID-19 shutdown. And to a person all over the city, those small businesses, those individuals told me, Mayor, we got to have hope. Our customers need to see us. We need to get our employees back to work. And that's what we're determined to do. When you see that kind of resolve on the part of residents who had every right to be in despair, that gives me energy. That gives me a sense of urgency about what I must do to help those people that are so in need, but yet still have tremendous hope and energy about the future of this city.
Mayor, you and I have had conversations in the past, and you are, if I may say so, a bit unusual. You're unusual in that sometimes you're paying attention to the smallest level player. Most of our economic aid and support is organized and designed around larger firms. Even technical small businesses are bigger than the businesses in a way that we're talking about today. And that's why I kind of like this study, because I thought, wow, here are data points. What Aman Bhutani says is, there's sometimes people's side hustles, and those side hustles can become very successful. But I'm interested from your perspective as a policymaker, what should we do? What should people like myself and others do to kind of help put these micro ventures on the map so that there is some stewardship of the ecosystem in which they're growing, some awareness of what they need. I guess what I'm trying is, sort of remember that Dr. Seuss story of, we're here, and, how do you be heard at that level? And we're in Washington, D.C. here. I'm trying to figure out how to get policymakers in Washington to become more aware of a kind of business that you're already very aware of.
Well, I think first and foremost, they need to listen to mayors, because we are on the front line. We do have a pulse on what's happening in our city at all scale, and our small and micro businesses are really hurting. They're suffering. That's why I'm still hopeful, although my hope is dimming a bit, that we're going to see some relief in the form of a stimulus to help small businesses and micro businesses. But mayors have to have a seat at the table. There's no federal policymaker who's really going to be able to take that pulse like we can. And we want to be at the table. We want to help shape federal policy because we know what's going on in our cities. We are out there, we are present, and we are the chief advocates for our small business and micro business community. So having mayors have a seat at the table and federal policy making, to me, is one of the surest ways to make sure that those businesses won't be passed over, that their needs are going to be met.
And Mayor, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this. You've talked about the importance of the social justice track, if you will. Yes. It's also an economic track of making sure that Chicago has many more successful Black and Brown owned businesses. Have you been what's the secret sauce of bringing in the white part of the business community so that they are committed to that future and they don't look at it as a zero-sum game, but they look at it as something where everyone is gaining in that environment? Does that make sense as a question? How do you diminish the tension between groups and say, hey, this is good?
Entirely. That's a great question. Look, the reality is, if we don't make investments in Black and Brown neighborhoods and in businesses in particular, we still pay. There's a cost to our neglect, and we're paying that now from decades of neglect in Black and Brown neighborhoods, not investing in human capital, not making the kind of investments where small businesses and individuals can build wealth. And we see it in poverty rates. We see it in life expectancy gaps. It shows up in our emergency rooms. It shows up in our jails. We have got to turn this around, and it's in everybody's interest to do so. We will spend less on the front end and we invest now in human capital and people's lives than we will on the back end trying to correct problems. And the economic pressure on those who are successful will become even more intense as time goes by if we don't make these kind of investments now. We know that. People are fleeing high tax jurisdictions where we haven't made the investments to grow the tax base and build wealth. That's what I want to be about in the city of Chicago.
I really appreciate that perspective, Mayor. We're taking questions from the audience. We have a good question here from Doug Devereaux, and Doug is a project manager at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So I take he's a DC guy. But he says, are there any strategies based on offering training to individuals to operate bakeries or food processing facilities in distressed areas, making high-quality food products for health-conscious consumers throughout the country, using small facilities donated or shared? What I like about this question is it makes a distinction between informal companies and formal companies. I think it's a very important distinction. I'm just wondering if that's been on your map at all as you've looked at development, particularly in the south and west sides of Chicago.
No, very much so. It's a great question. We created a site called The Hatchery, and it's really very aptly named, on the west side of our city. And it's exactly this. It's an incubator space, but it's for chefs and small businesses focused around food service, whether it's catering, but places that don't have bricks and mortar stores, don't have the capital to get there. And it was formed by a number of our very top elite chefs, Rick Bayless being one of them, who I think people know, one of the best chefs in America, and realized that there was this need. So the people people come in, they get really basic training on kitchen skills. They have access to industrial kitchens, and then they're being able to use that to launch their businesses. It's been a tremendous success, and we're going to keep it going and open up other kinds of opportunities because we know that this works, and it really puts people in a good place to really launch their lives and their careers and their businesses.
I just want to tell Doug and also Mayor Lightfoot, later in today's program, we have two of my favorite entrepreneurs, are Jackie Wright and Nikki Howard, sisters who co-founded Furlough Cheesecake here in the D.C. area during one of the longest government shutdowns. And it's sort of along that line. Have been very successful, and we're going to have them on the show later today, kind of talk about some of this serendipity. Mayor Lightfoot, thank you as always for spending so much time with us and talking to you. I wish you very, very well with the important cause you have of teaching, of trying to help folks learn how to fish as they think about their own economic development and course. So thanks so much.
No, thank you. It's always a pleasure.